Hello and welcome to the World Take That Theatre. Joining me in conversation is the multi-award winning songwriter, producer and longtime friend of Take That, the one and only Mr. Eliot Kennedy. Thanks so much for joining us, Eliot.
I am honoured indeed to be in the inaugural Take That Day lineup. That's all I can tell you.
A lot of people watching will know you from your work with Take That, especially on Everything Changes. But your portfolio is absolutely immense. I mean, you've worked with the likes of Bryan Adams, of the Spice Girls, of Blue, and of course the late, great Aretha Franklin. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into the business?
A bit like everyone, really. I started as a T-boy in a studio. You know, prior to that, I was a musician. I can't remember not being. You know, as a kid, I grew up in Australia, actually, and my dad was a singer on what the equivalent of the Northern Working Men's Clubs up here, but in Australia. And then he did a bit of telly on different shows, and I would just go to all these gigs with him and sit, and of course, sit in the dressing room with a pop and crisps and just sit there waiting for him. And you get to know sort of songs, and it's interesting because Gaz has a similar kind of thing with his Working Men's Club time as an organist, and we all do Working Men's Clubs up here because it's part of being a musician. It's how you learn your chops, you know, as a player, and you have to be good. You know, you have to be really good to survive in that world, and it teaches you how, because you're playing hits all the time, classic songs. I sort of learned the structure of songs and learned how to sort of play those and understood melody, chord, bass, the relationship between them all. So I would go home and play these songs with my dad's, and I just was able to play them. I was self-taught, but it was kind of weird. And then that sort of led to wanting to write my own stuff. So I was like 11 years old. I was the kid in school. We moved back to England. I was the kid sat at the piano every break and lunchtime. Anyone from my school remembers me as the kid in the piano room, you know. And I just sat there in the hall with this grand piano. And that eventually leads to writing songs. And thankfully, my cousin had some equipment. He was a musician, and that led to demoing and, of course, school band. So you know, moving forward, I sort of went straight into wanting to be in a recording studio. I got a job as a T-boy, like we all start, you know. One thing led to another, and that was actually the studio we wrote Everything Changes in, and did my first session with the boys. So it ended up being quite a significant place in my life, which is still in Sheffield, where I am now. Actually, just probably 100 yards away from where my actual studio is now. That building's still there. So it's a real significant point in my life, that. And then meeting the boys, meeting Gary, and of course we got on brilliantly. They'd never worked with a producer who was the same age as them. So we just got on really well, and Gary and I particularly clicked because we had so much in common. We pretty much did the same thing. And now he's like my best mate. It's funny, literally just before I was talking to him. And so we talk every day, you know, usually a couple of times a day, if not by text or by, you know, this sort of thing. So it's turned into a lifelong friendship, which, you know, is one of the things I treasure the most, really. So it's been a busy time, but after meeting Take That, obviously I carried on being in touch with Gary, and his career would take that way, and my career as a songwriter and producer sort of paralleled, really, and we would get together periodically, and we'd find that we were in New York at the same time or in LA at the same time, and we'd get together. Or if I was doing anything that was exciting, I remember going to work with Burt Bacharach one day, who was my idol. And the first person I called was Gaz to say, I'm working, you know, and he sort of said, oh, have you got any ideas? And I was like, no. And he said, pull over, don't go in cold, you know. And it was just so, we've been there for each other through the years to sort of help each other out. And then, of course, getting together to write Finding Neverland was a joy. Working on X Factor together, we just, you know, we come up with these crazy ideas like the Jubilee trip, you know, anything that allows us to get together and muck about and make music is a joy, really. And it continues, you know. We've got some crazy things that we're working on right now that you guys you'll learn about next year. But it's great. It's always great. But first and foremost, we have a great friendship. And that's the most important thing. That's the thing we both treasure and protect and maintain. And even if we're not working together, we make sure that we talk to each other a lot.
That's
it's
lovely.
important.
That's really nice. Can I talk to you a little bit about your relationship with Gary then? As you say, you have become the best of buds, and it's well documented that Gary had a tough time a few years ago, and he cites you as being instrumental in his return to music. How does that make you feel?
You know what? I remember that period of time. It was the Gary versus Robbie stuff. It was ridiculous. The press obviously championed Robbie. And, whatever you think about Rob, I mean, look, you're a Take That fan, so you're going to have a, good feeling about Rob. And Rob stayed at my house, and we became great friends, and we had, and when we see each other, we have a great time. But I remember the pain that it created as well. I think Rob is greatly sort of wishes that hadn't happened. I know that Gaz does. No one wants that kind of thing to happen, because they started out, with the same vision and all the rest of it, had so much fun together. But it just happens, and press make it worse, and worse it actually is if they'd actually talked at that time. But of course, it's never people, it's always people's people. Do you know what I mean? The people around you that are managing you and telling you what to do, and it's not always the right. Anyway, listen, this is life, and it's an experience, and you get better at it. And they worked it out like that, like I knew that they would do eventually, and they have a respect for each other. But during that time, it was a dark time. Gaz had sort of lost his way a bit and doubting his ability, and I think depressed, actually, But I remember calling him one day and just saying, because I read the newspaper, and just said, "I hope you're not reading it." And he said, "Oh, do you know what? You're the only person that called me that I know." And I just thought it was tragic. And I said to him, "Do you know what? If you're ready to work, I've got something in mind." And I was actually just in the process of developing Blue with Hugh Goldsmith, who put them together. And I said, "I want to bring this band over." And he went, "Oh, let's do it." And that's it. And that was the beginning of it all. We started True North, and we just had 5 amazing years writing hit after hit. Delta Goodrum and Blue, we did 3, 4 albums with Blue, I think. It was just a fantastic run. It was great because I saw him day by day coming back and getting excited about music again. And he's just so talented. So for me, I just saw that I'd got like the best kept secret. You know what I mean? As a writer and a producer, beyond being an artist, he had this incredible gift to give to musicians, to young artists. He's been there, done that. So the advice he would give them was just, they'd never get it from anyone else that's more valuable. So I just thought that I'd got the best kept secret in the world, that Gary Barlow was a writer and a producer. And we had incredible time. And then that, of course, when Take That started again, that side of his career sort of blossomed. His ability as a songwriter was never in doubt. He's the best songwriter of my generation. And it's a joy working with him. It's a joy, being a part of that career.
We briefly touched on Take That. Can I take you back to those early days? How did that partnership come about? When did you first meet, and how did that come about?
So the way that it worked for producers like myself, it wasn't about writing initially. I got a phone call. Actually, the way it started was I made a record for Lulu called Independence, and it charted. And Nigel Martin Smith, who managed the boys, was a Lulu fan, obviously heard it on the radio and said to Gary, "Whoever's produced it has really made it sound great. We should get to work with it." So I got a phone call from RCA, their record label, just saying, "Would you like to work with Take That?" I'll not tell you what I said because it was no swear. But suffice to say, "Yeah, go on then, all right." And this, of course, Why Can't I Wake Up With You was the current single at this point. So it was the end of that album, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They hadn't had a number 1 at that point, but they were getting there. You could see it was coming, it was getting better and better.
Yeah.
So I think that got to number 2, seem to remember. It was really close. But I said, yeah, I'd love to work with them. So the way it worked is you went into the label, and back then we used to use this thing called DAT, the digital audio tape.
Yeah.
And it was like a digital master. And because Gaz was so good in a studio, he would do his demo, and then on the DAT you got the vocal, just his lead vocal. So what you had to do as a producer is do your version of the track, your production, lay his vocal over it, and if they liked it, you got to make the record. That's how they sort of audition producers, you know. It's a bit technical, a bit of a technical process, but it's actually relatively easy for us, because it's just like, oh great, well the lead vocal is there. But the song that I chose to produce first was Wasting My Time, which is obviously on the Everything Changed album. Yeah. And there was no separate vocal for this one song. So I thought, so what do we do then? Then he went, well, can you get a singer in? Well, I'll do it. I'm a singer. So I just did my best Gary Barlow impression, of which I'm quite good at now, by the way. But what they'd never done is worked with a live band, and I loved working with real musicians. So I got like a drummer and horns and a real band in, and did this demo. I sang the vocal and sent it back to them. And then I just got this, I remember this, I didn't hear anything for a few days. Of course, we had to post everything back then, there was no online. And I got this phone call, and hello, Gary here, what's this demo? Loving this song, lad, and that was it then. Do you want to work together? Of course, yeah. So they came down, and we just got on brilliantly. We got on so well, we had such a laugh. Like I said, I've never worked with a live band, so I wanted to make sure that was all happening while they were in the studio. I could just see Gaz, he'd never experienced that before. He just worked on machines and drum machines and stuff. It was just a whole new world. So while we were making the record of Wasting My Time, he said to me, look, we've got a bit of a problem. We're doing this song for Rob, but he can't, it's in the wrong key for him, which means we've got to do all the vocals again. It's this disco song called Relight My Fire. And he said, we've got no time, can we do them all here again with you? So we did all the backing vocal arrangements again so Gaz could sing that song, because they were running out of time. It was like, this was like Tuesday, and the delivery for the album was the following Monday. Wow. And we were still making these two records. And then he said, look, as a result, we haven't got a song for Rob. Do you fancy writing one? So I said, absolutely. So that day we wrote Everything Changes. And that became Rob's song on the album because of Gaz having to do Relight. So we had this crazy schedule. And then to add to us, his Elba, one song short, but I've got this song I need to finish called Whatever You Do To Me. Will you do it with the live band again while you've got the musicians in? So literally from Tuesday to Monday, we made 4 records, which meant we were working 20 hours a day for like the rest of the week. And I remember mixing Everything Changes through the night because the courier was coming on Monday morning to pick up the masters and the master tapes. So we had to work through the night on Sunday night, and we mixed Everything Changes, finished it at 8 in the morning, and the courier came at 9. It was literally like that, down to the wire to get it done. So it was all very last minute, but the energy was brilliant. The enthusiasm was amazing, and that sort of bonded us. And then within a couple of, it seemed like a month or so, I got the call to do the Beatles medley for the Top of the Pops, when they did the black and white thing.
Yeah.
So that was all